How's it going, everybody? Welcome to week 10 here. We are getting into Buddhism. A new sort of, not a new, this is why I wanted to kind of walk through Upanishads and Hinduism because they share, as we can see now, they share sort of the same dynamics and some of the same concepts. But as we'll see with Buddhism, some of those concepts, they've adapted them and changed them a little bit. That's why sometimes we refer to Hinduism as sort of orthodox because it sort of stays with sort of what the Vedas, Upanishadic thoughts, whereas Buddhism and as we see Jainism are heterodox. They take them in different directions. So, the first lecture kind of talks about who is the Buddha. What do we know about this figure? We figure that he's a historical person. We have records of his name and evidence of inscriptions of him. So we assume he lived. He was most likely a prince. Lived in a kingdom. And again, some of these, I mean, every religious figure, there's a mythology around this idea that when he was born, a sage came and said he's going to be the greatest king or the greatest sage ever in the world. His dad wanted him to be king, so he locked him in the palace. And then Buddha gets out, sees sort of the suffering around the world, wants to change that or address it, goes on a quest to figure it out, ultimately comes up with, sits under a Bodhi tree and thinks about it, ponders, is enlightened with this idea of the Four Noble Truths, right, which he came up with. And that, the existence is suffering, so this idea of samsara is still there. Its existence, its cycles of suffering exist. That's why people get old and sick and all of this stuff. But there is a cause of this. The cause of suffering is desires, presumably our desires. We are the ones causing our own suffering by wanting things we don't have or looking for other things. But that's not the end of it, right? Because there is a way to stop the suffering, right, and limit it, and that is the Eightfold Path. So those are the Four Noble Truths. The Eightfold Paths, I gave you a list of those as well, just kind of like do things, right intentions, right speech, right knowledge, right actions, right, that think about, do things, if you do things that are in the best of your ability to make things best for everyone, you will limit suffering for yourself and others, right? That's kind of this idea that it all sort of hinges on that. And that's really Buddhism. And what it rejects in this, right? It rejects the Varna system. It throws that out, right? That there's no classes. In fact, there's only two different distinctions within Buddhism and Jainism, as well as the lay, your average everyday Buddhist, and monastics, who can be both male and female. And that's the only distinction, right? And both of them have different dharmas, right? That the lay community is meant to follow the Four Noble Truths and support the monastics, and the monastics remember, back in the day, they preserved the teachings of the Buddha, the Sutta, lived in monasteries, right? Received gifts, right, in food, and in exchange they would perpetuate the Dharma, right? So this idea of Dharma still exists, but there's no varnas and there's no karma. There's the idea of this karma persists over eons and over lifetimes. That doesn't. In Buddhism, they come up with all these different ways to explain away karma. The biggest one is impermanence. Nothing is permanent. That everything rises and falls. And that so even karma is part of this. The actions you do are actions specific to that point. So it doesn't perpetuate over time. What you did as a 12-year-old does not affect what you did as a 20-year-old, right? And if you did something bad when you were 20, that bad thing does not regain with you. You can change that over time, right? That these deeds don't multiply. So, and the other big thing is there's no gods, right? There's even the Buddha himself is not technically not a god. He's just a metaphor, an analogy, something to follow. And it's his words that are important, right? Believe what he says and work on cultivating yourself, right? So there's no God, so it's just you and your suffering and your desires and your cessation of those. So that's Buddhism in a nutshell. So we can kind of see why you have to kind of understand the earlier parts to really sort of where Buddhism comes in to understand Buddhism itself. So that's that. And then we talked about Jainism, which comes up at the same time, Mahavira, and Jain ideas that it also breaks off. It also rejects varnas and rejects gods. Though there are sort of models of ways to live. Mahavira and these Tirthankaras are models that that you should try to emulate. Same deal, same distinction: laity and monastics. And then the big thing with Jainism, everything has a jiva, everything has a soul, so you need to protect that. So that's why they really emphasize this idea of ahimsa or nonviolence. There's certain foods they don't eat. They try not to kill any living thing, human or animal or even plants. Which yeah, and then that's kind of their worlds, and they kind of come up in the same sort of elements. That's the topics for today. Next week we'll look at Buddhism as Buddhism spreads, become a world religion. It's just the seed of it. But really, your assignment for this week is your first drafts of your final projects. I think about a month ago, everyone submitted topics. I gave you some feedback on those. My biggest feedback was some of these topics were very broad, so now you can kind of be thinking about how you want to approach these topics, narrow them down a little bit, and hopefully you've read the guidelines. So this week, again, a draft is just words on paper. It does not need to be complete. In fact, I don't need a complete draft. I don't want it. I want one page sort of explaining your topic and sort of narrowing it down to something manageable. Again, look at the scope of what we have left of the semester, what you can actually get done, right? If you're going to, like a lot of people say, I want to do Jesus. I mean, there are entire branches of the library dedicated to the history and ideas of Jesus and Christianity. What do you want to say about that? What is your focus on that? So narrow that down a little bit. The other part of your final project, it's a paper, but also a presentation. So I want you to get like 3 main points. This presentation, you're going to have to put it on a PowerPoint. You can narrate if you want. You don't have to. We'll get to that as we get done. But this outline, what are these 3 main points you're going to focus on in your presentation? And that'll, they'll work. The presentation and the paper should work together, that you're explaining a little more depth in your paper. In your presentations where you get to show some of these things, images, bullet points, narrow that stuff down a little bit. And then also works cited. You need 2 primary sources, 2 secondary sources. So take a look at those. What do you want to, and hopefully that'll help narrow down as well. So get all that done by Friday. You can go back, look at your topic if you want to. You can keep that topic. If there's something else that's come up that you want to be changed to, now's the time. Change to it. But here going forward, it's we don't have much time to pivot afterwards. Upload all that by Friday, and then everyone into your peer review groups. I've broken everyone up by alphabetically into groups, so upload it there, and then over the weekend and up until Monday, look at your other partners, other group members' submissions, and just give some feedback, mainly main points. What are things that were interesting? I gave a little rubric there, just answer those 2 questions. And again, the idea is that you probably are still trying to figure out exactly what you're trying to do with your project, look at how other people are approaching it, see how you can apply it there. So that's that. The other thing is I got back, I returned, looked over your Hinduism, your God, your temple, and your festival. Good job. There were some really interesting ones. I really liked some that I didn't even know about, which is great because that's the beauty of Hinduism. There's just so much out there. One thing I do want to say is there were some that were really almost like the exact same. So I'm assuming those were found via AI. The one thing I found is I clicked on everyone's sources. And again, I mean, they're really kind of drawing for a religion of thousands of gods with thousands of temples with hundreds of festivals. We're getting like 2 or 3 citations. Some of them are in Hindi. Some of them don't work, which I'm just assuming is sort of AI stuff. Be mindful of that. And we're in Buddhism. Be mindful. Don't let AI do your work for you. Don't let it do your learning. Let it do your work. Let it do the work part, but you still got to learn. You've still got to apply. If it gives you like an outline of these 3 things of Ganesh, right? Go in there a little bit deeper. Find out. I mean, it's for so much stuff out there. I mean, the idea of that assignment was to kind of find something you're interested in and learn a little bit about it. It seemed like a few people just kind of whatever the first thing popped up online, they just threw up on there, and that sort of defeats it, right? I mean, if this temple that you cited, could you even find it in a map? Like, what would it look like? Do a little bit more research. And honestly, from my side, it is sort of defeating to read just the same things over and over again with absolutely zero thought on your end. If it continues, I've taken some notes, right? And if it persists, I'm just going to stop reading those things. So if it's AI and it's clear and it repeats exactly what somebody else does, I'm just going to move on to somebody who's to a student who's sort of invested a little bit more into it. So, but take a look at those. I mean, again, Hinduism is very exciting. There's a lot of things. Look at the ones that were a little bit out there, and yeah, I'll post them up there under the midweek check-in. But definitely this week, get on your first drafts of your topics. Great.